Let's talk about the major implementations of Python. Um, there's CPython, PyPy, Jython, IronPython, MicroPython, and Cython. And we'll go into a little more detail on each of these momentarily. CPython, the latest version is 3.8. 2.7 was declared dead earlier this year. It is written in C. That's where the C in CPython comes from. It has its own bytecode. It is bytecode compiled. It is not strictly an interpreted language. Unlike Java.class files, the bytecode is not something you carry forward from one release of the runtime system to another. Instead, it's something that is written to a distinct file for each version of Python and thrown away frequently. CPython can kind of be just-in-time compiled using a decorator called Numba. Numba actually has two modes. There's Python mode and no Python mode. Python mode actually doesn't help much, but no Python mode can be a significant speed up. CPython is the interpreter originally written to implement Python by Guido van Rossum, and is the reference implementation, meaning what CPython does is what Python the language should be. CPython is what a lot of people mean when they say simply Python, but today, again, that's Python is more of a language and CPython is more of an implementation of a language. PyPy is a subset of Python. No, PyPy is a full-blown Python that is written in Python and can transpile itself into C. Transpilation being a neologism that means compiling or translating from one high-level language to another automatically. PyPy supports Python 3.6.9 currently, and it also supports Python 2.7.13. Interestingly, the PyPy project doesn't intend to kill off Python 2 anytime soon because the dialect of Python PyPy is written in is very close to Python 2. PyPy can be much faster than CPython, but not always. In particular, I recently saw a simple program with a lot of regular expressions that was quite a bit slower on PyPy than CPython. But normally PyPy is quite a lot faster. And PyPy is also a framework for writing JIT-compiled language implementations. Jython is a Python interpreter written in Java. You used to be able to compile Jython down to .class files. I don't believe you can anymore. And version 2.7 of Jython is Python 2.7. It JITs, of course, because it runs on the JVM. Work, unfortunately, on a Jython of Python 3 has apparently stalled. So Py4j might be a better option than Jython today. Py4j being a bridge between CPython and the JVM. IronPython is a Python written in C# from Microsoft. Version 2.7 is Python 2.7. It JITs, of course, because it runs on the .NET runtime. It doesn't have much of a Python standard library, but it's still a Python. It just has different modules that you can import. And a 3.x version of IronPython is being worked on. MicroPython is very interesting. It's written in C. It was originally intended for microcontrollers. It also runs on Unix and Linux systems. And version 1.12 is essentially Python 3.4. Now, MicroPython, very interestingly, has been compiled to WASM or WebAssembly, so we may be seeing it running in web browsers before long, and it's a relatively nice implementation of Python, so that sounds kind of exciting. Cython, the latest version is 0.29.15. It too is written in C. It transpiles a Python-like language to C. When I say Python-like, I mean it has a few additional keywords. It requires a few more type declarations. And the important thing about Cython is that it's fast, and you can pretty freely intermix Python and C data types. But you have to be careful with the type conversions, because if you convert between Python and C types too much, it can actually end up being slower than plain C Python.